Ladies and gentlemen, this RedGaming.com video, we're going to be discussing recent rumours surrounding the Xbox One's hardware. This comes to a supposed insider from Microsoft who has been discussing the Xbox One's hardware further, and we're going to go into exactly what he said in just a moment, but suffice to say, he's not very impressed with the ESRAM, and has also said that what they've been doing with the hardware is risky. So anyway, this insider, supposed insider, is known as Seaboat, and has been fairly infamous actually on the internet with various leaks and rumours and so on. Now, not all of them are true. Not all of the leaks and ideas and comments that he's made have actually come to pass, but quite a large percentage have. And so many people are believing that he most likely does indeed work for Microsoft, although we're not exactly sure what position he holds in the company or whatever else. Anyway, he types in rather broken English. I don't know exactly why, but I'm going to basically read out, not in verbatim, because you would not be able to understand a word I'm saying, and I'm not just kidding here. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually try and read them out in a translated manner. In his first comment, he said, "By the way, I hope you aren't fans of 1080p on X1. When HW hardware is out, you will see what I mean about issues. Upclocks 2, risk everywhere, this place is nuts, 2014 was a better plan." In his second post, he says, and I quote, "Never mentioned Forza not being 1080p. They could make it, but exception, not the rule. Through this gen, never mind, try to match eye candy, and thanks to ESRAM, 720 to 900p would be the norm for the Xbox One." Now, that's the end of the quote. So that's a fairly odd selection of choices for him to say, but right, let's discuss this. This is a huge issue, to be honest with you. The internet is literally going nuts. There's been various forums that have been discussing it, a couple of tech websites, that type of thing, and some of them have gotten like 50 to 60 pages of posts alone because it's been kind of going crazy. So obviously the Upclocks are discussing the fact that, of course, Microsoft have raised not only CPU clock speeds from 1.6 GHz to 1.75, but also the Xbox One's GPU speed from 800 to 853. So that was somewhat of a concern by some people to begin with, because people said, well, you know, what's going on? Were they initially planning on it? Were they really tweaking it? Microsoft, the engineers, one of them by the name of Andrew Goosen in interviews has said, well, they just happened to find that they actually did have headroom in the hardware, and they basically fine-tuned the parts after the final silicon was created, and they found that indeed they had a decent amount of headroom, about 6.7 and 10% respectively. But if this comment's true, in reality, then the Upclocks are somewhat risky for Microsoft to do. In other words, they could be risking overheating. Now, I do grant you that the posts are somewhat, let's go with hard to read. That's deliberate and purposeful by the poster, of course, and one of the theories with the Xbox One was it was originally intended to be released in 2014 at some point in the timeline, perhaps, you know, maybe March time or so. In other words, 3 to 4 months, maybe a little bit more later on. So they had a bit more time to work on the hardware. However, the theory is, and I'm not saying it's true. I'm not saying that I believe it or anything like that. But the theory that I've been reading is that basically Sony's Sony's unveiling caused Microsoft to start pushing things forward and to try and push for an earlier release. But let's leave that for the side for a moment, and let's discuss instead the ESRAM. So the ESRAM, of course, is the very small, fast amount of memory which Microsoft hope to basically utilize rather than just DDR3. So DDR3 can be utilized for some things, for example, texturing, but for, say, frame buffers and so on, it's not going to provide enough bandwidth. To give you an idea, you're looking at about 68 gigabytes per second of DDR3 bandwidth. That's not including overheads. From what developers have been leaking, and obviously that's unofficial, so I'm not going to come down. I don't have an Xbox One development kit to do any testing on whatsoever. So I'm just using hearsay from developers and what they've been commenting on. But they're saying that it's probably about 60 gigabytes to maybe 62 gigabytes per second of bandwidth in reality, in other words, actual physical bandwidth, because there's a difference between theoretical and what you can actually achieve in reality. For example, the PlayStation 4, the GDDR5 memory, the theoretical max is 176, but developers have been stating it's probably going to be, in the real world, about 172 gigabytes per second. And the basic theory at the moment with the ESRAM, and obviously this is extremely early, I would like to point out that not only are developers being somewhat tight-lipped, a lot of developers anyway, some are being fairly open about it, but also the programming techniques right now kind of suck. In other words, they're still trying to get used to how the hardware works, and also things such as APIs, debugging software and so on is nowhere near as final as it should and will eventually be. But the basic theory right now is that just the frame buffer alone, 32 megabytes of ESRAM isn't enough, especially when we're starting to deal with high FPS at 1080p. The basic theory is that, quite simply put, the ESRAM just won't have enough memory in it to be able to keep up, and I'm not exactly sure. So basically, the question is, does the ESRAM have enough memory? From my own research, and admittedly it's still fairly early right now on just how frame buffers work with the ESRAM, because not all of the information is documented. AMD themselves have said quite bluntly that you're never going to know some of the stuff that's actually been done in terms of the custom design. Is that simple. They're never going to unveil all of the modifications. They're never going to unveil exactly how every single thing works, simply because, well, yeah, they just don't want to, because some of it's like trade secrets and so on. So, but at the moment, it does appear like the 32 megabytes of RAM is just not going to be sufficient, at least to make things easy for developers. Furthermore, as kind of like insult to injury, you've obviously got a huge deficit when it comes to shading power. Shader power, I'm sorry. For example, the Xbox One usable is about 1.18 teraflops of computing power. It's technically 1.32, but 10% is actually reserved for the operating system, for example, Kinect and so on. Although Microsoft say that they want to try and get this down a little bit. Has considerably less ROPS than the PlayStation 4. It has 16 versus 32, and ROPS are incredibly important when it actually comes to putting the scene completely and utterly together. It also has considerably less texture units. It actually has about, well, not even about, it has 48 texture units compared to 72 of the PS4. And then, of course, the PS4 also has other advantages as well. Having said that, as far as I'm understanding it, and as far as the rumors go, the Xbox One has, of course, a higher clock speed in terms of the CPU. It also has considerably, very powerful anyway, let's go with that, functions such as Shape, which is an audio processor. It also has the move engines to help to reduce or at least help to offload the work from both the GPU and the CPU when it comes to moving data around, that type of thing. And you've also got many other custom bits and pieces inside the machine as well. So of course, it's still very early. However, it's unknown to me if this guy is speaking the truth. Seaboat, some people believe him completely and utterly. Other people have said, well, he's not always been accurate. So I'm not gonna, say he is accurate. He's not accurate in this particular case. Obviously, sometimes even if he does work for Microsoft, he could be slightly mistaken. But one thing for certain, and my own personal perspective, now Microsoft have told developers the clock speeds that they're working with, in effect telling the developers how much power they've got to work with. And now the games are so final, they can't go back on the clock speeds. And even if they, even if the developers were cool with it, the media would tear them apart. So now they've basically selected the speeds. And so they really have to hope that everything runs okay, because I don't really think people are going to be too tolerant with another Red Ring of Death fiasco, or whatever this particular system does if it overheats. People are already getting a bit antsy because there was the whole rumours of the PS4 having issues with the red line of death. I've got another video on that going into exactly how that works, but I don't really think Sony are going to have huge problems with that. But the Xbox One is looking to be incredibly complicated. And there were also rumours and reports regarding yield issues, which Microsoft said were not true. However, they seemed to be fairly consistent, and then they said they had issues with the ESRAM as well. Apparently, this was down to the way the ESRAM was integrated into the APU. And despite the fact that the PS4's GPU/CPU combination, everything else, the APU basically is SOC, is humongously powerful. It has 18 C units, compute units, a lot of shaders and stuff like that in it, of course. The Xbox One's SOC is actually considerably more complicated because of the addition of the ESRAM and the hardware move engines. And of course, the reason they had to utilize all of those was because of the DDR3. The move engines, of course, the primary job for them is to offload the CPU and the GPU, but it's also to help move data from the ESRAM to the main system memory. In other words, it's DDR3. So, as I said, I would like to just reiterate it, and I've said it several times, but this stuff is not confirmed. I'm just reporting it because, well, I like to report any tech rumors and stuff like that, as you guys are aware. I am, of course, still doing an analysis regarding the Xbox One's developers, the guys who actually put the system together, the architects. I'm still doing an analysis of that, so that will be up this weekend, the rest of that. Things have been a bit delayed for me because I'm actually moving servers at the moment. You guys might remember I've been talking about doing that for a while, but I had a couple of issues with the website just yesterday, so I was like, you know what, forget it. I'm just going to basically bite the bullet and begin. So, yeah, anyway, as I said, I'm not reporting that this is true. I'm reporting that a lot of people believe the guy because he has a history of being true, but then, of course, sometimes he's also been wrong as well. So you guys can kind of take your pick on this one. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. Anyway, it's at least food for thought, I suppose. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.